Good evening. On Tuesday, the US government launched a lawsuit against Standard & Poor rating agency and claimed $5 billion in damages. The reason given was S&P's alleged failure to lower the ratings of the subprime mortgages in 2006, even when it knew that defaults were gathering steam. A report quoting the US Justice Department alleges that S&P's fraudulent ratings contributed to the failure of a California credit union that required a multi-billion-dollar government bailout. It said Western Federal Corporate Credit Union bought the investments because of S&P's endorsement. Western Federal was among 5 wholesale credit unions that regulators took over in 2009-2010. In the US lawsuit, the main accusation is that S&P didn't opt for mass downgrades of subprime securities till mid-2007, even though it was clear a year earlier that many loans were being defaulted on and borrowers were struggling to repay home loans. Now, we all know that rating agencies around the world have not covered themselves in glory in any of the major financial crises to hit the world, whether it was the late 1980s Wall Street collapse meltdown or the Southeast Asian financial crisis of the 1990s, or even America's or Europe's own financial disasters after 2008. Most of their rating downgrades happened after the event, not before. In the wake of the US Justice Department's action against S&P, the big picture asks the questions tonight. Should India follow suit and make rating agencies more accountable as well? We'll be discussing that and the role of rating agencies and indeed their efficacy and effect on developments which more often than not tend to take us by surprise. And joining me tonight in the studio will be Krishna Kumar, who teaches economy and economics in Delhi University. Also joining me on the program is Mythili, Bhusnurmath, consulting editor of the Economic Times. There will be one more guest joining us in just a bit, but I'll introduce him as and when he comes. I'd like to start the show, however, with Mythili, if I could. First up, many thanks, Mythili. Good evening to you as well. There is this view, Mythili, that the subprime crisis would never have happened without the credit rating agencies issuing stellar ratings on toxic mortgage securities that inflated the bubble, really. Do you share that view? Your thoughts on the line that the Justice Department in the US is taking right now?
Well, the rating agencies were certainly caught with their pants down, and they were, caught wrong-footed, but they were not the only ones, because actually if one were to attribute blame, then one must go back even further up the chain and say the US Federal Reserve, which kept interest rates way below for much long after the dot-com crisis was over, and in fact Alan Greenspan, the former chairman of the Federal Reserve, was on record. He talked in terms, in fact, of irrational exuberance, but he preferred not to prick the bubble in advance, saying that it's easier to pick it up after the pieces, pick up the pieces after the event. So there were a number of people, a number of players, number of participants, all of whom contributed, I think, to the 2008 crisis. And frankly, it took everyone by surprise. This is not to say that rating agencies have done a good job. They most certainly haven't. And they've always been a little behind the curve. It's not the first time that they've got their ratings wrong. But it is one thing to say that they were negligent, that they didn't do a proper job, and another thing to say that they had done it deliberately and they had defrauded the public or had defrauded the sellers to, the people to whom they sold the instruments. Because the argument that rating agencies really give is that theirs is an opinion and it is ultimately buyer beware.
Right.
But there are lots of things that are wrong with the existing ratings model. So I think that is what we need to address. It's going to be very difficult to establish that there was deliberate fraud, and I think that is where the US Justice Department is going to find itself hard to establish that there was fraud.
I'll come to that in just a bit. It's very interesting you mentioned that, because I want to go into what the US Justice Department is really saying, but that's just in a bit. I want to go to Krishna Kumar first. First of all, reactions on what you've heard, what we've read about this, and do you agree with Mythili on that one?
To begin with, this is not the first verdict which has come. There's been verdict which has come from the Federal Court of Australia. This is in response to a set of counties who had basically invested in a set of debentures like this, in a set of bonds like this, on the basis of suggestions which are basically given by S&P. So there also, there's a pending judgment from the part of the federal court which says that $16 million compensation should be given. And in United States also, there has been yet another case where Morgan Stanley, it's against Morgan Stanley that the Abu Dhabi Commercial Bank goes seeking justice. That too with regard to assets which were overrated, which compelled them to basically take it into their books, and that had resulted in major losses which they incurred. But the specificity of this case is that it is basically being filed by the US government.
Right.
US government against a leading rating
The biggest
agency.
rating agency.
The biggest rating agency by the biggest government. So now if the biggest government can file a case against the biggest rating agency asking for compensation, would it not be starting something like this that different other countries have got different other financial institutions which has also burned their books as a result of actually piling up to these toxic securities on the basis of the same rating agency suggested.
Right.
So I think now what is going to happen is that the Department of Justice of the United States government has taken a lead, and it is yet to be seen as to whether the other governments across the world and other institutions across the world, entire of Europe as well as different parts of Asia also, who have also burned their fingers against it,
Right.
are they going to now take it up? Because the credit rating system per se, like how Mythili has really now said, that you have they being part to it. And when the going is good, there is a particular method of rating which is basically being done. And when the going goes, and it is going off in seconds, the volatility of the system is such that the process of financialization is such that a rating which is good for a second need not be the same in another month.
No, I take your point. Before I go back to Mythili, I want to ask you one more thing. Mythili said that it was one thing to accuse them of bungling up the ratings. Another thing to accuse them of doing it, to actually devising to do it, to actually doing it on purpose. Now, it seems, and there is this view, especially in the US right now, if you read the Washington Post, if you read the leading dailies and the business papers, it seems what they're trying to say is that the entire ratings industry, which has of course reaped record profits in the boom years, at least they did, was going to escape unpunished, unrepentant. Do you subscribe to the idea that they should be held accountable? Because now it seems like they will not go scot-free. Do you also believe that what they did was intentional and was wrong?
See, there is this oligopoly of sorts which exists between S&P and Moody's as well as Fitch.
Yeah.
So there's this oligopoly which exists between them in such a way that in case they're going to be harsh and in case going to be very serious with respect to rating of a product, fairly enough, the companies would not go to them indeed to get their products rated or indeed to get their particular assets rated. And if their assets are not given a favorable rating, then definitely different commercial banks which can hold these assets in their own assets, they would not be ready to basically hold it precisely because they lack rating. So giving a AAA rating from a particular S&P rating or a particular Moody's or something is considered to be necessary for that particular bond to click or that particular asset to click in the market. At the moment, that is not going to happen. And if another person is going to please you, automatically you will actually switch your loyalties to the other person and you will lose business. And on the other hand, if you're now not going to please your investors, and the investors are also not people who are really thinking that they are waiting for a rating indeed to buy it, but the sort of inner happenings within the system. And we should be ashamed that governments across the world were trusting these agencies indeed to find credibility and telling that only if they are rated at a particular level of rating should you basically subscribe to it. And we have basically given them a license of sorts. And now they are now counting upon the First Amendment of sorts of the United States.
That's going to be their defense.
You have a freedom of expression.
That's going to be their
defense.
We
have already said that there are a lot of risks associated with it. And like how all of us know about the mutual funds advertisement, the mutual fund, they will celebrate that advertisement. At the end of it, no, the risk has to be borne, they will save in a quarter of a
I get your point. I get your point at all. I want to go back to Mythili on this one. But before I ask you a question, Mythili, let me tell my viewers also, but whatever one's view might be on with regard to S&P or other rating agencies, the lawsuit against S&P and its parent company McGraw-Hill and Companies says, and I quote this for you, from September 2004 to October 2007, S&P knowingly and with intent to defraud devised, participated in and executed a scheme to defraud investors in certain mortgage-related securities, and that the agency falsely represented that its ratings were objective, number one. Number two, independent, uninfluenced by any conflicts of interest. Now, that is a serious charge. My question, Mythili, to you is this. The subprime crisis wasn't the only example where rating agencies got it wrong, intentionally or otherwise. The underlying problem remains unsolved, doesn't it? A lack of proper regulation in the industry. These ratings firms get away in civil suits more often than not.
No, certainly in this, there's something basically intrinsically wrong with the rating model as it exists today, because the people who pay for the ratings, who pays for the ratings? Those whose instruments you're going to rate. So there is a conflict of interest clearly over there, and that is something that you need to address. But having said that, Athar, let's also be very clear that why did the same problem not occur in a country like India? For India also, for instance, under the Basel norms, rating agencies are doing rating of companies who are subsequently to whom banks give loans, and this rating is an input into the bank's decision. But the banks themselves also do a due diligence, and this rating by the agencies is only an input into the bank's decision. So had these rating agencies been properly monitored, had the banks themselves also been properly regulated and supervised, maybe these kind of excesses would not have happened, because who did these rating agencies sell these instruments to? Maybe wrongly rated, maybe excessively optimistic, but they were being sold by and large to investment banks. So what were these investment banks or credit unions doing? Why did they buy blindly? This is not to defend the rating agencies at all, but I am just saying that they are not the only ones who are guilty. But so one does need to do much more to get them to be accountable, but to put the blame on them is going to be difficult unless you establish that they had done it deliberately and there was an attempt to fraud. If they could say that, look, if we felt a great moderation, if you remember, those were the years when everything was hunky-dory. Nobody thought that the party would end. Even Chuck Prince of Citigroup had said, as long as the music is playing, we've got to get up and dance.
Right.
And that was the environment in which this was happening. So I think what you really need to do is address the lacuna, and there is this grave lacuna of conflict of interest in the entire rating model. So I think that is what you need to address. And if you can establish that any particular rating agency had deliberately defrauded, then certainly you must charge them.
Right.
But to hold them responsible just because the rating went wrong, I'm not very sure it will stand in the court of law.
Well, fair point. I'll take a small break right now. We'll come back and we'll discuss what Mythili said. Also some other points that I want to discuss. Don't go anywhere. We'll take a small break. We'll come back. Keep watching The Big Picture. Welcome back to The Big Picture. We're of course discussing the US Department of Justice decision to go after its biggest rating agency, Standard & Poor. Also joining us right now is Jagannadham Thunuguntla, equity head with SMC Capital. Many thanks for joining us. Let me come straight to you since you just joined us. Your reactions on the biggest government in the world going after its biggest rating agencies. Do you think that the Department of Justice is saying that the fraud was devised, it was not unintentional, it was intentional? Your first reaction on the news?
I think they were way too late. I think they should have been proactive in the first place instead of being reactive. There is no point in barking after the thief has stolen the game away. So in 2007, Ben Bernanke in the Fed meeting, they clearly said that credit rating agencies were not up to the mark in their duty. So they should have made the reaction straight away. Now, by saying that they were wrong, just actually putting a band-aid on the problem which they could have been stopped in the first place. Now I think credit rating, because we have to appreciate that trillions of dollars of bond market runs entirely on the opinion of credit rating agencies. They always escape saying that it is our opinion, it's up to you to take or not. But unfortunately, they will have a pricing power, they will have the pricing will be dependent on the ratings given by them. So I think we are giving too much significance to one single analyst who may be just walking by subway and then giving trillions of dollars of bond rating.
But do you not think that this is going to have a huge impact on the way these rating agencies work?
Absolutely. I think there should be a structural reform. Warren Buffett famously said that Wall Street is the only place where the person who runs in the Rolls Royce take advice from the person who walks in the subway.
Right.
So I think this is exactly the same thing. I think with due respect to many credit rating agency analysts with just a Harvard or Stanford degree, that's the only qualification to validate their claims. Besides that, they are like any other human being. I mean, how can you expect that trillions of dollars of that to such a complicated structures of CDOs and which even after the damage, it took more than years for the people to understand what went wrong. And how can he expect that at the first place to give that rating?
Absolutely. I want to go to Mythili and ask her this question very quickly. There is also the other side, Mythili, namely that it's almost impossible for any rating agency to get everything right. And like you already said that, especially when companies invest in complex derivative products where the underlying risk is difficult really to evaluate completely. Many financial firms did exactly that in 2005, in that period from 2005 to 2008 in the run-up to the Lehman crisis. Now that is going to be S&P's defense, which is what most of us agree on. How credible do you think that line is going to be when the DOJ or the Department of Justice goes after S&P?
No, I don't think that will carry much weight for the simple reason that if you do not understand an instrument, it is the duty of the rating agency to say, look, we don't understand this instrument, rather than giving a good rating to an instrument they don't understand. So if they have done that, then I would certainly hold them guilty. But if they have they genuinely made a mistake, they genuinely felt that the great moderation as it was would continue indefinitely, because let's be honest, nobody really anticipated the 2008 crisis. In fact, it caught almost everybody on the wrong foot. But the fact is, as rating agencies, they're supposed to be more specialized, they're supposed to have their antenna up, not just the rating agencies, even the investment banks, the commercial banks. Everybody made a mistake, but you will expect greater responsibility from the banks, from the rating agencies, because they're not just lay investors. So yes, they certainly made a mistake, and what you really need to do is to ensure that this kind of conflict of interest, which lays itself open to making these kinds of mistakes. If I'm going to pay you, I'm certainly not, you're not going to give me a bad rating, because if you give me a bad rating, I'll go to somebody else. So there are two things you really need to do. A, you must cut the link between the person who pays, the person who's rating your instrument you're rating, he should not be the person who pays, number one. Number two, you should have much greater competition in the rating industry, so that you don't have the present situation where you just have 2 or 3 large rating agencies and they more or less tend to follow each other. If you had a large number of rating agencies and better regulation of them, and you cut this knot between the rater and the rated, then I think you will have a much more successful model. And then if you can establish that yes, there was deliberate fraud, certainly penalize them. But in the absence of that, I think it's going to be difficult. So I think you need to use this opportunity to reform the entire rating system.
Point taken. Mythili. Krishna Kumar, you want to say something?
No, yeah, Mythili, but in the case of this Manhattan judgment, that's the Manhattan judge had basically come up with this argument saying that there is a case of exchange of messages between individuals working in it, where one of them comments that, see, should be rated. The other says that even if the cows have made the instrument, we would rate it.
Right.
So to such an extent, if there is an extent of message transfer which has happened, and the judges sees to the matter that there has been something untoward which has happened within the rating agency. So to that extent, if there has been evidences, nothing could possibly stop them in actually taking a case against, say, in that particular case against Morgan Stanley.
Right.
And moreover, they say it's our opinion. I mean, point is, if it is any other opinion, then why should you pay it in the first place? Because any person, any layman on the street can give an opinion. That's one. Secondly, they say that whatever opinion we are giving on the basis of the circumstances as of today, because they say we can't predict the future. But you are rating an instrument which will be, repayment will be in future. The payment of interest will be in future. You are taking the repayment responsibility and the credit worthiness of the borrower on the basis of rating. So by logic, you are rating the future itself. So that's your basic duty, because doctor cannot say that I operated to my best ability, but the person passed away, and that he should not say it every time.
Right, absolutely. I want to get to a more central theme that I want to get reactions from all of you. First, Mythili, I'll come to you. In the wake of the drama, if I can call it a drama, being played out in the United States of America right now, should India now also take steps to make rating firms more accountable? I want thoughts from all of you, starting from you, Mythili.
Well, certainly, I think every person, particularly in the financial industry, should be made far more accountable than they are at the moment. Having said that, as I said, I think you need to devise a new system. Maybe the people who should pay, maybe the people who pay for the ratings, it should come maybe from the stock exchange, maybe from the investing public at large, maybe from SEBI's Investor Protection Fund, because certainly you need to do away with the system, as I said, where the company which is being rated itself pays for the rating. The moment you do that, then you are inviting trouble. So I think you need to reinvestigate and rework, reinvent the entire rating model as it exists today.
Jagan, structural reforms needed?
Warren Buffett again famously said that don't ask the barber whether you need the haircut or not.
Ask yourself.
A barber will justify even you need a haircut.
Right, absolutely.
So I mean, in that sense, similarly, don't ask an investment banker whether M&A makes sense or not. He will come out with all operation synergies that can be expected in the world. Similarly, don't ask a credit rating agency whether it deserves the AAA. When I am paying the fees, I will be getting the AAA. So that's pat your back, you scratch my back, I scratch your back kind of phenomena. Whole logic is sort of a questionable thing. Why are we, it's a highly overrated concept. Why trillions of dollars of game has to be run on opinion when it is just an opinion? I think in that sense, I think Mythili had a point that we need more competition. I think even in India, we have only 3-4 big agencies, and the largest of them, CRISIL, has more than 50% market share. That's not a fair game. I think there should be more players. What's harm? We have more banks. So what's harm in having more rating agencies? Let there be more fair play.
Right. Competition needs to come in the
competition needs to come in, and like how Mythili had pointed out earlier, that within the banking system, we have a method of actually making a revaluation of the instrument before they take the purchase of it. So rating should not be considered to be the end all also of the purchases of these sorts of assets, because they are also bearing a large amount of risks. But nonetheless, it should be seen that a number of developing countries have now shared the subprime risks. Number of developing countries away has shared the subprime risk on the basis of the ratings of these international credit rating agencies. So to see to it that we also do not fall prey to it, one, there should be competition in it. Two, there should be agencies which are independent of the rating agencies, and one should really think as to whether rating agencies are really profit-making institutions, should be profit-making institutions, because in as much as they have an objective function to maximize in the form of profits, one would definitely find that there's large amount of conflict of interest which would come in.
Right. Mythili, I want to come to you. I want to ask you a question. A small beginning has been sort of made, though capital markets watchdog SEBI now has sort of cracked the whip on rating agencies. SEBI has said that a credit rating agency cannot now offer any fee-based services other than credit ratings and research to its rated clients, while its regulations would apply to ratings of all kinds of securities, bank facilities and services. Is that a step in the right direction, albeit a small one?
It's a very small one, because as I said, basically you need to break the link between the rater paying for the rating. So that is, I mean, the company whose instrument you're rating, that is company only pays directly for getting the rating. So there's obviously going to be an interest for you to get a higher rating by paying more. So that is what I think SEBI really needs to address. Maybe there are different models have been suggested, whether the government should pay for ratings. And I want to make a point that the difference between the opinion given by the rating agency and what Mr. Thunuguntla said about just being an opinion, the idea is that the rating agency gives you an informed opinion. So as between the opinion given by the man of the street and the rating agency, you do expect a higher due diligence from the rating agency. That's why you're paying them. But you need to have a better system, an arm's length system of paying them, either through the stock exchange or through the investor protection fund or through the government, if you think rating agencies are doing something positive. If they're not, then there is no case for having, making a payment through the exchequer or through any other alternate means. But as long as the company which is getting the instrument rated pays the rating agency, you're going to have trouble. It's just an invitation for trouble.
Absolutely. We'll take a small break right now. I want to come back and get last words from Krishna Kumar and Jagannadham Thunuguntla. Don't go anywhere. Lots more to come on The Big Picture. Welcome back to The Big Picture. Jagannadham Thunuguntla, SMC Capital Equity Head, is with us. In the break, we were talking about one instance, what happened with, what is the company's name again?
Shrey Infrastructure.
Shrey Infrastructure. There was an incident that happened with them. Just remind us of that incident, and also what can we learn from that?
A Calcutta-based listed company, Shrey Infrastructure, they were rated by Fitch. They rated them about B. The company is of the opinion that they deserve AA or a better rating than B. They went to court saying that the rating by Fitch is not up to the mark. Shrey may be of the opinion that in that pressure of legal battle, then maybe Fitch may be accepting. But SEBI said that it's not a fair approach, because that will dilute the positioning of both corporates as well as credit rating agencies. Whatever it might be, take off the court settlement and settle the issue. But what it signifies, the whole event signifies that yes, I think there will be differences of opinion between the corporates and companies as well. Moreover, one thing I would like to draw a point is that whenever a company being rated for the first time, the credit rating agencies have to inform to the companies even before it is being announced publicly. If the company didn't like it, then credit rating agencies should not announce it publicly. For example, that's an official position. So that means if, let's say, I rated for the first time B, if the company says I don't like it, so the credit rating agencies should never publish. But follow on, credit rating agencies has a right.
The first time they cannot do it if the company doesn't like the rating that it gets. Should SEBI get more involved in this, in getting that structural reform that we need?
Yeah, of course, SEBI should take the initiative, given that it is a public institution. Possibly in our country, the public institutions itself should take lead with respect to this sorts of rating. But that said, I should also say that the credit rating agencies worldwide are wielding so much of power over the fiscal and monetary policies across governments. We have the downgrading government bonds across the world, including in United States. So you have a big recession happening, but you have sovereign bonds of different countries or borrowings of different countries being downgraded, forcing the governments to go for contractionary policies, which happens during the time of recession. That's a sort of power or authority which these oligopolistic rating agencies are wielding across the world. So to actually control, rein them, as well as to see to it that they're properly regulated is in the larger interest of one another.
Absolutely. On that note, I must end the program. I must thank all my guests, of course, before I sign off. Mythili, Bhusnurmath, many thanks for joining us again on The
My
Big
pleasure.
Picture. Jagannadham, Thunuguntla, as well as Krishna, Kumar. Of course, two things that were very important, that I think were very important. One, competition. More competition is needed in this particular industry. That cannot harm anything, that only help. My guests agree with that. All my guests agree with that. Also, what Mythili said was very important, that whether or not S&P, whatever it did was intentional or not, hasn't been proved yet. They might have got it wrong, they might have bungled it up, but it hasn't really been proved whether it was intentional or not. We'll have to wait and watch what the DOJ, or the Department of Justice in the United States, actually does with that. That's all the time we have on The Big Picture tonight. Athar Khan saying goodbye, good night, and thank you for watching.